not even an ethnic group. They're escaping from Egypt. They join with other nomadic tribes. They come together, and so they tell their story. But they tell their story in a cultural context. And the cultural context of the day was that women were property. The cultural context of the day, the socio-historical reality of, not of the Jews. They had kind of an egalitarian democratic process because they were all from all over, but they had come from years and years and years of patriarchal, monarchical models. And so these are the models these are the socio-historical realities of our tradition. And in these socio-historical realities, women are second-rate citizens. And this is how it is played out. So I come today to say that, whereas we have we have three things, I think, and this may be true for both of us. We have a body of conflicting literature, which you do not have. You seem to understand just exactly what God is saying at every minute of you really are very much clearer about God's will for you. And we are always discovering God's will for us. We are always not reinterpreting outside of a context, a theological framework, but we are always in an application kind of mode. The second thing is we have a history of tradition as it is witness and practice. And I think this is where we also differ from you. What I heard Doctor say this morning was that if people are not living fully and completely and perfectly the Islamic tradition, then you tend to say, well, that's not Islam. We tend to say, if people call themselves Christians, well, we're stuck with one another. We may not be perfect. We may have done some really seedy things like the Inquisition and the Crusades, but nevertheless, it was Christianity. So there's another point in which we explain ourselves differently. And it is in this kind of adherence, the different cultural contexts, that we have to see the struggle of women, I think. We have to understand that women have been symbolically idealized in our literature and tradition and have been made to feel guilty or unnatural for rebelling because they were not treated like full human beings. Women have been symbolically idealized in many cultural contexts for thousands of years, but indeed have not been treated as equals with the men in their society. And so for that reason, I do not see any difference between talking about the development of human rights for women or human rights for minorities or human rights for racial groups or human rights for those that are colonized by militaristic governments. It's all the same issue. It's an issue of power and control, and it's how the dominant society organizes itself to maintain that control.
Thank you. Have any comments?
I agree completely. I have absolutely no argument with your definition from scriptural authority. My point is that when I was raised up, and I don't know what denominations the two of you belong to, but the denomination I was raised in did not view the Bible as a history of community, as the history of a people reacting to one another and placing women within a context. I absolutely agree. That's been my basic argument, that the Bible is a history of community, and it hasn't been exactly my community. Therefore, I am not subject to that particular community's way of looking at things as a woman. I agree completely. However, my grandfather would have me in hell and burning forever for saying such a thing, because to him the Bible was from cover to cover, from the very first letter to the last letter of Revelation, divine revelation, authority, every comma, period, for all 60 versions of it, absolutely accurate. And therefore there was, you were bound by that. I have no problem with a more ecumenical view, none whatsoever. In fact, I think you're right, completely. It, however, is not the opinion of about 50 million Christian right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we have I'm sure you have lots to say, no doubt, especially after certain things are said and so on. But I'd like to stay on the main issue. We're not discussing is the Bible God's word or is the Quran God's word. So I would kindly ask you to stick to the topic, though this has some relevance to what we're discussing. But please keep looking at this sheet of paper. That's what we're going to go with.
I don't have that sheet of paper.
I'm sorry.
You didn't get the fax.
I didn't get the fax.
You didn't get my fax.
So if you missed it,
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, I
okay.
did.
That's what we're going for.
Cute.
So Dr. Lewis, you can.
You want us to work down the topics?
Yes.
All right.
The equality with men and divorce as a right.
Okay. We talk about equality with men. What I was trying to suggest in my rush through from Augustine to whatever is that I do think the Christian tradition is ambivalent. I do think it understood from the very beginning two things. It's very interesting to read these guys because, in fact, they come out on the side of subordination. But they know better. And so, because they've got Genesis to deal with. And there are two things about even Genesis 2. I mean, they know that humanity, male and female, is created in the image of God. Period. And there's that egalitarian thread, and they can't quite get away with it. Now, when you get to the popular literature, they abandon it entirely, but that's another story. The other thing about it is the business of Adam's rib. You're right, Ayesha. The church fathers dwelt on that discussion of woman from Adam's rib at a level beyond belief. But what they came out was that what the rib tells you, there's this wonderful passage, and I was trying to find it, and I can't remember which of the characters. So, John, you might be able to help me on this, or someone else. There's a wonderful passage in which someone is going on and on about why the rib, and the outcome of that is that so that woman is neither the head nor the foot of man, but walks side by side. And it's a wonderful phrase. It does not settle the issue for the tradition. You're right. By and large, the tradition is subordinationist, and one of the real, from my point of view, from some issues that we share a concern about, one of the real negative aspects of that is that in the tradition, as issues of sexual and family violence become an issue, the justification for violence against women within the family is I was disciplining her for her insubordination. So that comes home to roost for us in some very negative ways down the tradition. So, but I do think the other thing, the other tradition stands, and then there's this discussion we had this morning about the principle and the behavior.
Thank you. Dr. Jamal?
I just have one brief comment on the concept of equality. Because I'm sure some of you might say, in what sense did Islam equate men and women when the share of inheritance of women is in most cases, though not all, by the way, in most cases is half that of man? I know that nobody raised it, but let me raise it also just to clarify and remove any doubt about it. You see, I'd like to think in terms of equity rather than the word equality, because sometimes equality might convey a meaning of superficial equality in each and every item. For example, you could have a number of currencies in your pocket that adds up to the equivalent of 1,000 US dollars. I could have exactly the same value, but different currencies. In the matter of inheritance, you find that unlike the predominant system in the West today, for example, Islam has given women an additional, not just an additional financial securities and rights that it did not give to men. For example, during engagement, she's on the receiving side. At the time of marriage, she receives the marital gift, which is of course open. There is no minimum or maximum, but normally it tends to be consistent with the person's financial status.